Podcasts are pretty common. So what makes the Uncommon podcast uncommon? Well, it's all in our name. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and we at Uncommon Sports Group understand the unique pressures and temptations that come with a career in the sport industry. We provide uncommon training that helps you successfully navigate common challenges. Hit the follow button on this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Check out our website and become uncommon. What's up, USG fam? Welcome back to the Uncommon Podcast. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and I'm very excited to welcome St. Joseph's men's basketball video specialist, Chris Flegler, onto the podcast today. Prior to joining the Hawks staff in 2021, Chris was on staff with Fellowship of Christian Athletes in Charlotte, North Carolina, as well as coaching at the high school level at Cardozo High School, in the college level as an assistant coach at St. Mary's College of Maryland, ASA College Brooklyn, in Livingstone College. Chris, thanks for taking the time to join the show today.
Thanks for having me, Noah. Man, you just took me down memory lane right there. Just hearing all those different stops. Man, a lot of memories. But thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk about those memories today. And, you know, Chris, I want to start with the most important aspect of your life, which is obviously your faith in Christ and your journey with Jesus. And just start by telling me about your faith journey and when you really gave your life to Christ.
I'm glad you said the really part, because I remember going to a play when I was in the 8th grade. It was called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames, and saw this play, and it really scared the life out of me or the death out of me, whatever it was. It scared me, and at the end of the play, they did like an altar call, and it was like, anybody want to come and get it? Like, no, I was like, I'll come. I just don't want to go to hell. And so I went down, and I guess that you could say I gave my life to Christ that day, maybe. But as I got older and matured, I learned that, you know, at that moment I was coming to God out of fear. And I think that the fear of God is something that we definitely have to have, just because He is the Almighty One. But I didn't know Him as a God of love. And so, like, I went so many years just kind of like playing the fence. I was like a professional fence sitter, like just kind of playing both sides. And when in 2011, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I started to go to church with her and her parents, and I really began to know God through a lens of love. Started to grow in my relationship with Him, and so like really to learn what it means to follow Him and to give my life to Him and to surrender. And so that happened for me about 13 years ago.
Wow.
And I'm super thankful.
Yeah, Chris, I appreciate you sharing, and I love that you touched on the fear of God. I think for so many of us as kids, right, we hear that message of heaven and hell, and obviously being young and naive, we don't really fully grasp that at the time. But it's amazing to see that God used that play and that interaction to really move in your life, and then using a relationship later on. And you know, Chris, I think too what many of us forget is how powerful our testimony is, and that's really why I wanted you to share that today. I think about you read Acts, right, and read about Paul's ministry. In every synagogue he entered to share about Christ, what he did was share his own story because it was impactful. So I think for us, right, working in sports, working in this industry, we can really use our testimony as a vehicle for others to know Jesus and really how He's impacted our lives. So I appreciate you sharing on that. I think it's impactful for all of us, and we all have a story, and it's amazing to be able to share it.
Yeah, because going back to the fear part, what the fear did without knowing the love, it made me avoid God. Yeah. And so I would fall into sin, or I would sin. I would choose to sin, and I would know that I was wrong because I would get convicted because I had this fear of God, I would just avoid Him. Yeah. And then when I came to know Him as a God of love and of forgiveness, unconditional love, that I could come to Him when I sin, and I would not have to avoid Him because I think that I'm going to be punished or rejected, but to know like that he'll embrace me, and he'll, wipe this slate clean as he already has done through Christ, and he'll allow me to just he'll put, he'll lift me up, and allow me to be stronger as I
Mm.
go on.
Yeah.
And so that love is really what drew me in,
Yeah.
whereas the fear is kind of like, and so it's a balance that we have to
Mm.
have, where it's like having the fear of the knowledge of God, which is just a reverence, it's a healthy
Mm.
respect, the
Yeah.
same way you would for a parent
Yeah.
who has created you and
Mm.
nurtures you and provides for you.
Mm.
But then you also know that your parent loves you, so you go and you talk to them when you're down, or when you messed up, or when you
Mm.
succeed. It's like, through whatever it is, like, my father loves me, so
Yeah.
I can come to him. And
Mm.
so I think that the fear definitely was necessary, and God doesn't make any mistakes, and
Yeah.
all this stuff is ordained with how we come into our relationship with him. And so it was
Mm.
just a process
Yeah.
that God had worked out through me, and is continuing
Mm.
to work in and through me on my journey with him.
Amazing, Chris. And I thought about Romans 4 when Paul says it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. And that truly is, I think, so elemental in our understanding of who God is. If we don't grasp his kindness and his grace, I think we miss out on the joy that comes in a relationship with Christ. So I love that you shared that, right? Because I think we've all fallen into either ditch, right? We don't fear God enough, or we fear him too much, right? I think there's both sides of that. So it's got to be a healthy respect and a healthy reverence that leads us to understand how good God is, not just how scary he is, right? So
So
I appreciate you sharing that.
yeah.
Absolutely. And Chris, obviously basketball is a passion for you. As I shared in the intro, you've been a lot of places with this game. It's taking you a lot of places. And I think the challenging part for a young person in the sport industry, but any industry, is finding what path is best for them. So how did you know that basketball was the career path you wanted to pursue?
Mm. I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's weird. I got it, man. I got stories for days, but my grandfather started calling me coach when I was 16 years old, and it was just because, I mean, we were always around the game, and I had a younger cousin. We were literally only 6 months apart, and he coaches now,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he was a big time player in the DMV, where we're from,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, how people talk about the high school parents or the AAU dads, and like that was
Yes.
me at 16. And so, like, on the way to the games, we were talking about the game and like preparation,
Hmm.
and during the games, I was like on the sideline. Like, sometimes I would be a little more demonstrative than others. At other times, I just kind of played it low key. But after the games, we would always break it down and
Hmm.
analyze things. And my grandfather just started calling me coach, but I had never actually thought about coaching. I was just wanting my cousin to be successful,
Hmm.
uh, and to do well. And so, um, in 2009, so you just fast forward all these years, and I go through my own stuff, like playing in junior college and all these things, and I was at a point where I really didn't know what I was going to do with my life. So I was like wanting to get into acting, and just do a whole bunch of other stuff. And I
Yeah.
was working at a soul food restaurant in DC. Shout out to Ooze and Oz.
Hmm.
Uh, Go pick them up. It's really good soul food in DC. But I was working there. I worked there for a number of years, and the owner, I actually was living with the owner. Me and his stepson are really close friends to this day,
Hmm.
and so it's right across the street from the junior high school that like all of my family went to, and up the street from Cardozo High School, which is one of my stops in coaching, and
Hmm.
right across the street from the housing projects that my family grew up in Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
And so I always was a person that was like a mentor or a leader.
Hmm.
And so the kids from this junior high school, they would get out of school and they would like just be causing a ruckus in the neighborhood, like at the train station, like getting into stuff, like going into the CVS, getting into stuff.
Hmm.
And I would come outside and I would just like kind of talk to them and try to share some wisdom.
Hmm.
Um, and so, I mean, the owner, he saw that. So I'm getting to the part. And so one night we were watching, and then always every day after the game, like me and my friends would go and play basketball, in the summertime, or in the wintertime, we would go play it in the indoor gym.
Mm.
Um, but we were watching the Cleveland Cavaliers versus Orlando Magic playoffs in 2001. I believe it was game one when LeBron had hit that half court shot. And I want to say Cleveland lost 4-1 that series. And because Orlando went to the championship and lost to the Lakers. Shout out to my guy Kobe Bryant that year. But we were watching the game, and Aji is his name. Aji said to me, he said, who's the owner of Uzi, he said, Chris, like, you love kids and you love basketball. Like, why don't you be a coach? And I was like, I just pondered on it, and it stuck with me like the entire night. So the next morning we were on our way to go and get all of the food for the restaurant. And I asked him, I said, yo, Aj, like you brought up this thing about coaching last night. Like, tell me more. Like, why would you say that? And he kind of goes into it about the things that he sees in me. And he says, if you want to coach, so in DC we have this thing called the Goodman League. Like, it's like the Rucker Park or Dykeman in New York.
Yeah.
And a lot of the top players in DC play there. And he was like, if you want to coach, like, you can, I'll pay for us to have a team, for the restaurant to have a team in the league. And so, like, all of my friends like play like Division I or Division II or professional basketball overseas. And so we just put a team together. I had been going down there for years, like watching my friends play and being a part of that. And we put a team together. And that was the first team I ever coaching my friends. And we did pretty well that year. Got a whole host of names that you guys would recognize that played for me on that team. And then that kind of led into me coaching high school basketball at Cardozo that next fall. And then from there, I mean, that was in 2009, and now here we are 14 years later. And it's just like, it really just happened because people saw something in me, from my grandfather to the owner of the restaurant. It wasn't something that I really had sought out to do, but once I started doing it, I really couldn't see myself doing anything else.
It's amazing, Chris. I love that story because there was multiple steps along your journey that led you to understand that. And I think coaching is something that is a gift from God in a lot of ways, because not everybody's designed to coach, right? I think that's so evident in the leadership nature and in the competitive drive nature behind coaching. And so I'm encouraged that there's people in your life that were sharing that to you. And I think for our listeners as well, right? It's good to have people around you who provide wisdom and guidance, whether it be a mentor, and we'll talk more about mentors later, or somebody just in your life who is giving you that guidance. So a lot to learn from your story there. And I think obviously coaching was a destiny for you. A lot of people were speaking that to you throughout your life. So really cool to hear that, Chris. And I'm glad it's something you're still doing and still pursuing.
Me too.
Yes, sir. And Chris, another tough aspect for young professionals is having this desire, right, to coach, but not really knowing how to get the foot in the door, how to really start a career in college or pro basketball. And so my question for you, Chris, is obviously you've been to many different organizations and universities and colleges. How did you get your start in this industry and get your foot in the door, per se?
Man, so that happened right around that same time. I coached 1 year at Cardozo. And I never, once I started coaching high school, I honestly never wanted to leave. I had grown such an affinity for like the players that I coached there. There was so many different guys there that I could relate to, and the ability to help them develop was something that I became really, really passionate about, and it's something that I found true purpose in. And so it was hard, but I'll tell you how it happened. So we were at a Christmas tournament, and as you know, it was Christmas tournament. High school was a bunch of different schools playing. So I stayed to scout the game after us because we would play the winner of it, and it was the Murray School, and I don't even remember who their opponent was. So I guess I just gave it away. The Murray School won, and we ended up playing them. And so I was out in the Murray School, and I'm just looking. I'm like, wow, like this team is really fundamentally sound. And so for me, I had grown to really appreciate, love, and understand the fundamentals of the game because
Mm,
I didn't come from a coaching tree. And I started like when I got into coaching, I had all these John Wooden books. I have
mm,
John Wooden, the creed I live by, like the 7 points of creed, right here on my wall now
mm,
in my office. And so I was studying him, and it was all about fundamentals. And so I'm looking at this team, and I'm like, man, it's so fundamentally sound. So before our game the next day, after when we were to play Murray, I went up to the coach. His name was Garrett O'Donnell, and I said, "Yo, coach, like, uh, pleasure to meet you. Looking forward to competing today. Just want to let you know, like, I really appreciate the way that your team plays. Like, got a chance to watch you guys today, and I'm just looking forward to the opportunity to playing you guys today." So we played, and we kept in contact throughout the year and going
mm,
into the summer. And so the school that I coached at, Cardozo Senior High School on 11th Street, Northwest Washington, D.C.,
mm,
is a public school. And it's right in inner city, uptown Washington, D.C. And Murray School is maybe 2 to 3 miles away, but it's in the upper Northwest section where it's like $40,000 a year for tuition. Um, Senators and politicians and like lawyers and doctors, like this is the school that their kids are able
mm,
to go to. And what I wanted to do for the boys that played for us at Cardozo was I wanted to open up their world and to expose them to something that was bigger than just their neighborhood.
mm.
Because I believe if you can see something and you can start to believe it, and then if you could try to achieve it.
Yeah.
um, and so I would do things like that. Like I would bring them poems. We would watch
Mm,
documentaries, all trying to open up the world. And so I called Coach O'Donnell. I said, I would love to bring my guys up to Murray to have the experience of just working out with your guys in the summertime. And he
mm,
said, man, Chris, like, come on. Like I would welcome that. And so my guys, we would hop in a couple cars or we would catch the metro up to Murray. And we did that for a few weeks, just working out with them. And so summer goes on, we play in summer leagues, all this stuff, and I'm all ready. I'm recruiting for our team, like from the junior highs for the next season,
yeah.
and and Coach O'Donnell just hits me up randomly, and he was like, "Hey, Chris, like, have you ever thought about coaching college?" And I was like, "Nah, I honestly have never thought about it." And he said, "Well, I want to introduce you to um, a friend of mine from my alma mater, St. Mary's College, Coach Chris Harney. They
Mm,
have a great team down there, and I think that you would be a good fit. Would you like the opportunity to meet him?" And I was
mm,
like, "Yeah, I'll meet him." And so I go and I meet Coach Harney, and I come back and I'm talking again to the owner from the restaurant and a couple of my friends. And so I've got offered this opportunity now to go coach Division III at St. Mary's College, but I
mm,
didn't want it. And so I told those guys, like, I want to, like, I understand like this opportunity, but I don't want to leave these guys. If I leave, what's going to happen to Dion? What's going to happen to Alarion? What's going to happen to Josh? Like, what's going to happen to these guys if I leave? Because I can feel the impact that I'm
mm,
having. And something very profound was said to me that I'll never forget. And what was said to me was, Chris, like, I get it that you love these kids. And he said, this is going to sound bad, but these kids are always going to be here.
mm,
Maybe not like those kids, but like there's always going to be kids here for you to coach. He was like, I think that you should go and better yourself. And then when you come back, you will have more to give them.
mm,
And it was really profound for me. And that was a moment where I just kind of like had to be coachable and had to trust like the people that God clearly was like surrounding me with and putting into my life, and really just to step out on faith
mm,
because I didn't know, like I was really comfortable, and felt like I had purpose and was having an impact. And so
mm.
I just kind of just stepped out, and that's really how I got my foot in the door, was just literally by stepping out on faith
Yeah.
and being coachable.
Absolutely, Chris. And I think that's one of the hardest parts about a young career in sports is you got to get uncomfortable. You got to go to new places, maybe even a school you're not familiar with, or it's in a division you're not really used to being a part of. Oftentimes those early opportunities are not the high level D1 schools, as we'll chat about later on, but it's definitely something you want to grow in, right? And you want to step into. And Chris, kind of a follow-up question. how did you manage being uncomfortable? How did you manage that next step of jumping to the college level of, man, like now I got to be uncomfortable?
Man, I don't know. I don't know how I managed it. Because remember, like I didn't start dating Adia until 2011. So this was a year before
Mm-hmm.
in 2010. So it wasn't like I was managing it by like really like trusting like that God had did this. It was rough for me my first year. It was many
Mm,
times that I questioned it, like, did I do
yeah.
the right thing?
Yeah.
I was far out in Southern Maryland, all by myself, not making a lot of money at all. Living a a makeshift room. Like I didn't even have a door on my room. I shared a house with the other coaches, and it was a dining room that was my room, and then we just kind of got the same thing you would use for in the office what's like a cubicle, and you just
Oh,
kind of put like that border up.
yeah.
I had one of those, like as the door for my
Mm,
room to have some type of privacy. Um, my Coach Harney, had given me a car, and it was really uncomfortable. I was
mm,
training middle school kids just to try to make the ends meet. I don't know. I dove into the work. I guess that's how I did it. I just as uncomfortable as it was, I just dove into the work.
yeah.
Um, I just found a way to be myself. Like
Mm,
it was the same things that the impact that I was able to have at the high school level is like, okay, these guys are a little bit older, but found myself still able to have
mm,
this same type of impact by just building genuine relationships
mm,
and pouring into these guys and serving these guys without even knowing that that's what I mean. I was just being myself, and so just diving into the work of
mm,
helping the guys,
yeah.
become better. I guess that was how I managed it.
Yeah. Chris, and I love that testimony. And I think about so many young people see coaches at the D1 level, right? And it's assumed that they just got there like in a couple years, right? It's a couple years of grinding, working, and you're there. But I think people forget the sacrifices you have to make along the way. And a lot of that is financial sacrifice. It's not having nice things, right? It's borrowing cars. It's living in a unique situation, kind of as you mentioned. And those sacrifices, if you love the game, excuse me, can be worth it. And I think that testimony you just shared is proof in the pudding, right? That as you go through this journey of playing or being a coach at this level, it's going to be a challenge and there's going to be sacrifices that have to be made. So I appreciate that testimony. And yeah, as well, too, of diving into the work, loving the work. I think that's something I want to mention, too, is a lot of young people look at what it's like to coach in March Madness. Like, oh, man, I'd do anything to get there. But what about coaching at these other levels, right? Do you love the game? Do you have a love for the work? And if you don't, it might be a challenge to get through some of those times of sacrifice.
That's true.
Absolutely. And Chris, a lot of your early experiences, as we touched on, it was at the junior college level, Division II level, D3 level. To share with us what those experiences at those smaller institutions really taught you about the industry of coaching. And do you feel like you benefited from working at smaller institutions as opposed to starting your career at a large D1 institution?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. Absolutely, I benefited
Hmm.
100% from the journey that I've I was on and that I've been on to get to this point.
Yeah.
So many lessons to be learned. I mean, one, you talk about like finances.
Hmm.
I mean, you learn how to do more with less.
Yeah.
Um, just as a person.
Mm.
Um, because you don't have just money to kind of just blow
Mm.
through. You have to be really strategic.
Totally.
You have to plan and be organized.
Yeah.
Um, so I learned that in my first 8 years of coaching, I made a total of $15,000 in 8 years from actually coaching basketball, and the
Mm.
$15,000 didn't come until my 8th year.
Hmm.
So the 7 years prior to that, it was all volunteering.
Wow.
Um, and so it's just learning how to do less with more.
Mm.
As far as institutionally and being at those different schools, I mean, you just kind of learn from people that you're around. I mean, there's great coaches at every level.
Yeah.
Coach Harney at St. Mary's, we went to the national. We lost in the Elite Eight my first year
Wow.
nationally. We was top 10 ranked program in the country.
Hmm.
2 years after I left, they went to the Final Four. But I learned so much from
Hmm.
him in that program that is a part of me today.
Hmm.
Going to the junior college level, we had tremendous success and was top 25 ranked team in the country. And learning
Wow.
from Coach Wilcox and Coach Martinez, just so many things that are still with me to this day. And then the same thing at Livingstone. Like our coach is really creative with how he switched up defenses,
Hmm.
um, and just his philosophy. And so you learn a lot. But I mean, I think the one constant is that doesn't change no matter what the level is. That you're working with people,
Hmm.
and so at our core, like we're all the same. So even though the levels may be different,
Hmm.
like for the most part, the people are the same. Everybody has a dream.
Yeah.
Everybody has something that they're pursuing. Everybody has something that they're going
Hmm.
through, that they're dealing with. And so it's just when you just know how to connect with people, it's almost
Hmm.
like to that degree, the level doesn't really matter.
Right.
Like the same dream that my guys had at Division 3 or Division 2 of being the best player that they could be are the
Hmm.
same. It's the same dream that the guys have here at St. Joe's.
It's good.
And so meeting people where they are
Hmm.
and being committed to helping them develop,
Hmm.
it kind of keeps things simple, regardless of the level. But those are some of the things that I've learned. It's just
Hmm.
like as much as there's is different
Hmm.
on the surface, when you kind of really dive into it, it's all the same.
Yeah. Absolutely, Chris. And I think what really stands out to me about about your journey is you took those proper steps to become a good coach. And I think that's honestly the hardest part for a lot of young people is just trying to see like, man, this journey is arduous. It can seem long, right? You talked about 8 years, $15,000. Like, man, that's a lot of perseverance, right? But I think to your point, you learned just as much in these different organizations at junior college level, D1, D2, D3. You've been at all of them, right? So you know better than anyone else that there is a similarity between them all. And I love that you pointed that out, right? Because when you're a coach getting into this industry and really any part of this industry, coaching or not, you get into it because you love what you're doing. You love the elements of what you're doing, not just the glitz and the glam behind, the gear and the arenas and the travel. Like that stuff's great, but that's not really why you do it. So I think that's really just what I found profound about your journey is that aspect of it, of your journey and through all these different, different programs, different backgrounds, different players, but in it all, it was that love for the game and love for coaching that drove you to continue staying the course. So I appreciate you sharing. And really, I just want our listeners to learn from you that you can take these opportunities, right, and still reach where you are right now, which is that Division 1 level. It doesn't, make you stuck there forever. And I think it's smart to take those opportunities. So I appreciate you
Absolutely.
sharing that, Chris. It's a profound journey you were on, and obviously a lot of years of coaching at some great schools and learning along the way.
Still on it, man. Haven't
Yes,
arrived.
sir.
Probably will never arrive, but
Never
it's gonna
arrive.
keep going. It's gonna keep going.
Absolutely, Chris. And Chris, one part of your story that I really love and I think is powerful for our listeners is you spent some time working with Fellowship of Christian Athletes as a character coach and as well a pastoral intern with the church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Just share with us why you decided to step away from the game for a period to dive into some full-time ministry and really serve the Lord.
Man, that was God's plan. I did not plan for things to go that way. Like once I started on this college coaching journey, I didn't think that I was gonna have a year or 2 or 3 where I was not going to be
Hmm.
actually coaching basketball. That was a divine intervention, and it's crazy looking at it right now. It's because like we always, when we use even the word divine intervention, it's always when something favorable
Hmm.
happened.
Yeah.
And actually, looking back on it, it's very favorable
Hmm.
that it happened, but it didn't feel like that in the moment. And so, I take us back to 2017, and the season ended at Livingstone, and just kind of seeing what as the off season comes, and it's like, okay, what's next?
Hmm.
Um, and I was just working a bunch of different college camps. So I worked at camp. We were living in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time. The Livingstone was in Salisbury, about 45 minutes north of Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to work at camp at Davidson College with Coach Bob McKillop, and I actually got connected through it from my head coach at Division III St. Mary's, Chris Harney. And so I'm working the camp. It was a 4-day overnight camp, and I went home, and at that time, like our lease was about to be up, and I didn't know what was going to be next. I just knew that I was going to be searching for a new opportunity, and I was in between, and some of the places that I had like on the table, I really did not feel led to take it. I didn't think that it was going to be good for my marriage. I didn't feel like it was time for us to move, and so I came home from that camp. I'll never forget. It was on a Thursday. It was July 12th, 2017. And I walk in the house, and it's like, early camps end early, the overnight camps, and they give you your check and it ends at like noon. So I go home midday, and I tell my wife, I'm like, babe, like, I don't know what's next, but I don't feel led from God for us to leave here. And so I don't have a coaching job. I don't know if I'm going to get one, but the jobs I have on the table, I don't feel like I'm supposed to take. So let's just go down and re-sign the lease and trust God. And that was the first time, 2017, that I really like stopped trying to figure things out on my own. It was almost like a surrender moment. Like, God, like I have no peace about making a decision. Like, I'm just going to trust you. I'm just going to trust you. And I remember my wife telling me when I was a junior college coach, she told me one time, she said, Chris, basketball is a God to you. It's a lowercase God. And she said, and until God is God alone, like big God, like the things that you dream and aspire and that's in you to accomplish as a coach, she's like, it's not going to happen. God won't allow it to. And to me, I was taken aback because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I go to church, I take my players to church with me, like, and she's just like, it's everything for you. It's your idol. Like, you idolize it. It's all you think about. It's all you talk about. It's all, like, every conversation, like, it's just about that. And over the years, I could see like what she meant, but I really couldn't see. But again, I'm on this journey and I'm growing in my relationship. So in 2017, like, it was the first time where I was just like, God, I'm just going to trust you. Like, I don't know what's next, but I trust you. And so I get a job at the local YMCA in Lake Norman. And I worked there for about 10 months. And all I knew was like, okay, it's sports, it's kids. Like, to me, it's kind of, it ain't the same, but it is the same. So I can do this. It makes sense to me. And so I go from coaching Division II college basketball to coaching 5-year-old soccer on the weekends. And it ain't the same, bro.
No way.
But even that experience, it taught me patience, which I feel like I lacked a little bit because, I mean, it's a 5-year-old. They're not driven to win a national championship. They're just out there trying to have fun.
Yeah. And
so it taught me a great deal of patience that I needed, not just as a coach, but as a husband. And so during the week, I would go out and I would have to like paint the soccer fields to get the field ready for the games on the weekend. It was 3 fields. But while I'm out there painting them, like, it's just me and God. Like, that's it. I have nothing else I don't have a game. I don't have a practice. I don't have an individual workout. I have none of those things to distract me. God had literally isolated me and took me into a season of wilderness where it's just me and him.
Yeah.
And during that time, though, I would listen to messages from different pastors. Like, so while I'm out there on the soccer field, I got my headphones on and I'm listening to different sermons. I'm listening to the Bible app. I'm listening to my worship music, and I'm just growing in a level of intimacy with God that I had never had before.
Wow.
And that all was a part of his plan. That was this divine intervention. And so then that led to me, the church that we were attending, I was serving there faithfully, just like as a, in the men's ministry, like as one of the brothers in the church. And then the pastor saw something in me, knew my coaching background, and offered me an opportunity to come and just be on staff.
Mm.
Not really full time, but like
Wow.
part time internship. But
Yeah.
I looked at it as another opportunity to just kind of learn and to grow as a leader and to serve.
Mm.
So I did that for a few months, and then and then I got the opportunity. Just another crazy God ordained story about how Coach Sanchez and I, UNC Charlotte, connected,
Mm.
and how my church was connected with the director of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes on Charlotte's campus. And that opportunity kind of opened up for me to serve as the character coach and the team chaplain for the UNC Charlotte
Mm.
men's basketball program. And so God was just doing this thing where he was just kind of bringing me back into
Mm.
it, like as like the basketball arena
Mm-hmm.
at the Division I level or at the college level, but not fully allowing me to
Yeah.
be on the court,
Yeah.
but just not in a whole nother capacity where I got to just get uh, an elevated perspective of what this coaching thing is,
Mm.
and what really matters.
Mm.
Um,
That's
and
huge.
so God just his divine intervention just kind of worked, like Romans
Amazing.
8:28, all things together for good.
Amen.
Um,
Amen.
and so I don't even remember what the question was, but
You
I
an-
hope I answered it.
you answered it perfectly, Chris. And really what I want our listeners to get from that story is one, I think ministry is a powerful platform for God to work in us, right? And obviously ministry is a platform to impact others with Christ, and that's what it's for, is God uses us in that way. But Chris, you said a few things that really stood out to me. One is the opportunities that you had, you felt like weren't good for your marriage. And I think that is a really godly way to look at job opportunities. And for our listeners, a lot of them are not in that stage of life yet. But at some point when you are, right, you have to make those decisions with your wife and family in mind, which can be a huge challenge. And so that really stood out to me of family first, right? And Christ calls us in Ephesians 5 to love our wives as he loved the church, which takes sacrifice, right? And so that commitment you made was something that you valued. And I love hearing that, as well as using or basketball being a god and using it as an idol in your life. I think is so common amongst coaches because you love the game, right? You can't really help that you love the game, but do you love the game more than God is the question. And so for our listeners, right, you may not know that answer right now. Is basketball an idol for you? But in your decisions, in your actions, in the way you treat people, in the way you coach, right, do you turn God off on the court? That's one thing I always ask young people is, do you turn God off on the court and turn him back on after you leave practice? Because he should be influencing everything, including your coaching. And so I appreciate you sharing that part as well for our young people to be challenged by that. And I guess a follow-up question, Chris, is how did working in ministry make you a better coach? Obviously, you're back in it now. How did that time away ministering to people through the pastoral intern position as well as FCA make you a better coach?
Man, I mean, you just said it when you said like that question and you asked people, it's like, do you turn God off?
Hmm.
Um, the way it made me a better coach is that God was always on.
Hmm.
Like I'm coaching through his spirit.
Amazing.
And for anyone who doesn't know, like he's undefeated. God has
Amen.
never lost. So you talk about we have these conversations about who's the GOAT. God is the greatest of all time. He's never lost. His record is
Amen.
unblemished. He's undefeated.
Amen.
And who better to work for
Mm.
and to work through.
Mm.
And so that's really how it's helped to make me a better coach. I have a clear understanding of what really matters, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a compass for me. And
Mm.
so it leads every conversation.
Yeah.
It leads every piece of constructive criticism. It leads the words that I choose to speak.
Mm.
It leads my actions. It leads my interactions. It leads like everything, and it's making me a better coach. It's almost like the Holy Spirit does is it's just it gives you a light,
Mm.
um,
Amen.
that number one, like people are attracted to. They don't know why, like, but it's something different. They might can't put their finger on,
Mm.
but they're attracted to it.
Yeah.
and it is, I mean, being in ministry, like just in a vocational way, like it helped me to become a better listener,
Hmm.
because I wasn't the one that was barking the orders.
Yeah.
It was me sitting back and observing
Hmm.
and listening. So it made me a better listener. It made me more observant. Again, more patient and gracious in my approach. Because as a team chaplain and character coach, like my my only method of trying to like help you and get through to you wasn't to get you on the court and put you through drills to help you get
Hmm.
better. It was really like trying to find a way to reach your heart,
Yeah.
um, and kind of just like talk to you and get you to understand things from a different perspective,
Hmm.
and then just listening and being there.
Hmm.
And so I think that's one of the ways that I've become a better coach, because it's
Hmm.
just I have this capacity to just be there. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of times that's what people need. And if you're
Absolutely.
there and you're available, my coach says all the time, like your best ability
Yeah.
is your availability.
Yes.
And so being there, being available, it allows intimacy to happen in relationships to where now, like I can, maybe get through to guys with the little
Yeah.
bit that I know.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely, Chris. And really what I think I learned from that response, it was amazing, is basketball is a ministry. Basketball is, whether you're in vocational ministry with FCA or Athletes in Action, or whether you're coaching, you're in ministry, because ministry doesn't stop, right? You don't turn off that ministry activity in your life, because honestly, if you're claiming Christ, other people look at you as an example of who he is, right? And so the way we live, the way, as you talked about, you coach with your actions and your words, the way you give criticism, all those things are going to tell other people who is Christ, because Chris is claiming to follow Christ. Noah is claiming to follow Christ, but he's treating me this way. What does that say about Christ? And we're not perfect, but actions do really matter. And I love that you pointed that out, that as a result of this break from coaching and being in vocational ministry and being a team chaplain and a character coach led you to see that more clearly. I think that's, to your point, it's divine intervention in a way that you were challenged and equipped to go back into it in a really powerful way. And Chris, I want to segue on that point that you did get back into coaching at the Division I level at St. Joseph's, as a graduate assistant to start, obviously now, and on the video side and coaching side of things. But a lot of young professionals in this industry desire to reach that D1 job right away. Kind of as we talked about earlier, that's the dream and the vision. And obviously for you, it didn't happen right away. It took a lot of time, at different levels and being away from the game. So just kind of share with us, how did you remain patient in that process and finally get that position at the D1 level?
mm, once I decided to trust God in 2017, bro, like I really didn't look back on that.
Mm,
Like that was where um I was kind of putting my stake in the ground, and I was going to die on that hill,
yeah,
um, and just really trusting God to make a way in,
yeah,
and open up doors,
mm,
and 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 really just like allow it, like the things that I prayed for and that I put before Him and that I dreamed about, the things that I feel like He's placed on my heart and placed people around me to speak into my life.
mm,
Like I just trusted those things and knew
yeah,
like that God is faithful,
mm,
and that um like is what's the scriptures like, I think Mo was talk no I said Mo and Noah, I'm thinking about David and Psalms, and David is like, who am I that you are, like, who are we that you are mindful of us,
mm,
right? That God cares about
yeah,
his children. And like just knowing like I'm putting these things before God, and I'm not, like, my prayers aren't falling on deaf ears, and God sees my journey, and I see all these little
mm,
steps along the way and all these little tiny spaces where I could see like God there, and I could see God there, and I could see God there, and it's just like you just hold on to this hope
mm,
in Him
yeah,
more than you do into like the dream.
mm,
Like you just transfer it from like, okay, all of my hope is just into like coaching, and but like, and then you just transfer, and you take that same hope, and because we all have it, it's all burning within us, and we just transfer it over to Him.
mm,
But when you give it to Him, it works in His time.
Yeah.
Like I read this yesterday, and I got this book from actually from Scott Drew after the Athletes in Action breakfast at the Final Four in Houston, and I was reading. I'm on getting into the third chapter, but at the end of chapter two, Scott Drew says, "I'm reminded once again about how great God is, and to always trust His plan and His timing,
Hmm.
even when it might seem like it's causing you to let go of something important. What God has for you is always better than anything you can do on your own."
Hmm. Amen.
And then he closes it by saying, because he was talking about his dad and how his dad walked away from. He said,
Hmm.
because while my dad did walk away from the spotlight of big time college basketball in pursuit of a faith and family centered life,
Hmm.
the spotlight still found him.
Wow.
And so it's just like you remain patient by knowing that that God's way is just better. Is
Yes.
I couldn't have the way that I've gotten to this point, like it's nothing that I would have written out and planned out,
Yeah.
but it's beautiful
Hundred
and it
percent.
works, and it's a testimony that can encourage
Hmm.
others.
Yeah.
Only God can do that. And
Yeah.
so it really, man, it was just by trusting God,
Yeah.
just by
Absolutely.
trusting him.
Absolutely. And Chris, I love that last point too of the plans that we often make. And I think that is so normal as humans, right? Is we have a 10-step plan for our lives, right? Get married at this day, have kids at this time, get this job then. And so often those plans don't really work the way we actually basically every time. It's not just here and there. It's basically every time we make plans, God has different things for us. And oftentimes it's better. And I appreciate you sharing that even though there was ups and downs in your journey and it wasn't a straight line, that you're grateful for it. And Chris, even a follow-up question I thought of was the role you jumped into initially at St. Joseph's was graduate assistant, right? And a lot of people would think, oh, well, after all those years of coaching, how could you go back to being a grad assistant? So just share with me, what was the sacrifices you made for that, and how did you humble yourself to step into that role, even at your age and with your experience?
Man, me and Coach Lang and we joked about it when we talked about me coming here, and he said, "Chris, are you sure you want to do this?" He actually tried to talk me out of it, even though he wanted to hire me. And he was like, "Are you sure you want to do this, bro? Like you're going to be the oldest grad assistant in the country, maybe of all time in the history of college basketball." At at that time, it was like I was 35 or 36 years old, and and it just felt like, again, this was a moment where it didn't make sense. Like I'm on full time staff with FCA.
Hmm.
I have a decent salary. I'm able to be around the game and impact lives. And it's just my wife was on board. She pushed me. Uh, she was a big part of me taking this opportunity, and she believed in the possibilities of it. And so we left Charlotte, North Carolina, and we moved to Philadelphia. And so I go from full time staff making a nice salary to a GA and making under $1,000 a month.
Wow.
Um, and it really looked like to a lot of people it didn't make sense, but
Hmm.
it didn't make sense when God told Noah to build the ark
Yeah.
because the world was going to flood. And so it's just like I stand on those things. And there's just so many scriptures that help to sustain me
Hmm.
and give me life and be like my daily bread. It's just like standing on so many of those words and those promises of God,
Hmm.
to Jeremiah is like, I know the plans that
Yeah.
I have for you, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to
Amen.
give you hope in the future. Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not into your own
Hmm.
understanding, and all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct your path. And it's like all of these different things. It's like, man, it was a sacrifice, it was a challenge, but I
Hmm.
just wasn't going back on trusting God. It's like He's gotten us this far. Like
Yeah.
He's not gonna fail us. Like let's double down. Like we
Yeah.
a lot of times we so quick to like bet on ourselves,
Hmm.
and I was confident in betting on myself
Yeah.
because I knew who I was. I knew who I ultimately was betting on. I know who lives in me,
Yeah.
um, and so I just felt like it was a win-win. But it was crazy,
Yeah.
how that happened because to a lot of people, even really close family and friends, it didn't make sense.
Yeah. I really love that testimony, Chris, because it is, I think it shows a lot of humility on your end, right? One, to be able to, at your experience level and age, to say, yeah, I can take maybe this step down in the eyes of many people, a step down to this position. But at the same time, you knew what God had and you trusted him, right? And for so many young people, it's hard to trust God because you feel like everything's in your hands and that you're in control. And I think that's
Mm.
a false sense of understanding how much you're in control, because truly we don't have much control, a little bit, but not very much, right? And so I just love your story, Chris. I think top to bottom, it really shows a trust in God, but especially in this instance of having to take a step back in many people's eyes to really leap forward, right, into where you are now. And so I guess another follow-up, Chris, to that is, obviously you were in that role as a grad assistant. Now you're a video specialist. Being the younger guy on staff, being the guy that's newer to the staff and really, kind of lower on the totem pole in many people's eyes. How did you have the faith and confidence to be open about your beliefs in Christ and to live that out? I feel like that's a challenge for young people. It's like, oh, I'm the grad assistant, I'm the manager, I'm the video guy. I don't feel like I can really be open about this because, my staff doesn't believe the same way. These players don't believe. So how did you kind of gain that confidence to be open?
Yeah, I think it's about the depth of your belief. Um,
Yes.
when you know, like for without a shadow of a doubt, and you know for a fact what God has brought you through,
Yep.
um, you can't keep quiet. And you
Yep.
have to you have to share it. I think about the woman at the well,
Mm.
right? And when Jesus told her like her life, and she was convinced in that moment, and she's like, and she ran off and would tell anybody who would listen. And
Yes.
even if they weren't listening, she still would tell them,
Yep.
because she knew.
Mm.
And so I think it's about the depth of your belief.
Yes.
Um, and so that's how I'm able to do it, because I know all the many things that God has brought me through.
Mm.
How gracious and kind and forgiving and merciful He's been. How loving
Yeah.
He's been. How He's been a faithful friend. How He's been a constant provider.
Mm.
How He's protected me. Um,
Mm.
it's just, man, it's so many. It's the depth of your belief when you know
Yeah.
you can't hold that stuff back.
100%.
God is so good, and so you can't share it because you don't want other people. You want other people to be able to experience it.
Yes.
Almost like
Absolutely.
how can they know if we won't go? I mean, how would they know if we don't tell them?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then exhibit it.
Yes.
They won't, and so like that's the opportunity, really, that we have.
Mm.
It's a beautiful opportunity that we have to help others to know.
It
So
is. It
yeah,
is. Yep, absolutely, Chris. And truly, I think your point is amazing. That it's the depth, right? It's understanding what God has done along your journey, and then I think as well, just knowing that He's bigger than basketball, right? And
Mm.
if we choose to please people around us or to succumb to their views on how we should live and act, then God's not our God. People are our God, right? And we're substituting that, and so.
So
I think it's obviously, as what you said, the depth of what you believe and not being able to be quiet about it, and as well too just understanding that it's so much bigger than what anybody thinks. It's the truth, right? And we need to share about our God and how amazing He is. So love that point, Chris. Love that perspective, and I think for going back on the testimony point and where we started the podcast, that if you understand what God has done in your journey, you're going to be really willing and excited to share about that, and it's your testimony. And so I think that's a huge part of it as well.
yeah,
And Chris, really a huge part of any career in sports, and obviously for you as well, is mentors and having good people in your life who are willing to guide you, pour into you, help you grow as a coach and an individual. And so share with us who have been those mentors for you along the journey, and how have you benefited from those relationships?
man, that's really a hard one, because when you're the mentor, like as the coach,
Yeah.
it seems like you're always on the end of the giving,
Hmm.
and not so much receiving, which is there's a lot of good that can come from that, because I learn as much from my players as I probably can teach them.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I've been really blessed and fortunate to have a wonderful wife who is always speaking life into me.
Yeah.
Um, wouldn't be have gotten to this point without her. Um, so I actually would. She's my peer, but I look at her as a mentor in some ways.
Mm,
Um,
that's awesome.
I have like, other friends who I'm able to have conversations with. Coach Lane,
Hmm.
who's a man of faith, is a mentor to me. It's been so many people like along the journey. I can't say like it's just one person or a few people who I talk to consistently other than Coach Lane, because we work together and we, have a strong relationship. But
Hmm.
I mean, I think that's why like books reading is important. Like right now, Scott Drew is a mentor to me
Yeah.
just through reading his book. Like
Absolutely.
I would like to say that I come from the John Wooden coaching tree. If there's a coaching tree that I come from, like, because that was the person who I read like his words and what he
Hmm.
put on the pages and his philosophies,
Yeah.
and what coaching is about. So I would say that he's a mentor. I would say Coach Brian. I have this thing that I made this for one of my grad school classes. Um, and it's like my own little personal hall of fame.
Hmm.
And so like, it's just guys who it's quotes from people who I respect and admire.
Yeah.
And so I have like Kobe Bryant in here. I have Martin Luther King Jr. here, and I kind of flip through this stuff every day. I got Bruce Lee in here, Coach Wooden, Malcolm X, Jesus Christ. Like it's so many people like
Hmm.
that I just kind of allow to pour into me through the work that they've left.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, I guess I got a ton of mentors.
I love that, Chris. I love that. And truly, I think mentorship is the driving force behind growth, right? I mean, you think about all the people, parents are mentors. Obviously, Jesus, our Lord and Savior, is a mentor. If you read the scriptures, you will be mentored
Yes.
100%. And, I think young people struggle to value mentorship, especially in this virtual post-COVID world. I feel like relationships are just not valued to the same level as they once were. And obviously, in coaching and really in any industry, it's important to have people that are going to go and go to bat for you and fight for you and help you along the journey, because it's not an industry where you just apply online on LinkedIn and that's how you get a job in coaching. It's not
It's
how
all
it
about
works.
relationship.
It's all about relationships. And so I just would encourage our listeners to learn from you and from a lot of coaches who have had mentors who guide them, obviously spiritually first, and most importantly, but secondly on that professional level as well, of learning how to coach the game, learning how to recruit, learning how to be a professional, right? Media and those different things, and as well just finding those opportunities. So I'd say mentorship is a huge part of
Huge.
being a coach at this level. So I
It's
appreciate you
huge.
sharing that. And Chris, another common challenge of working in sports, and I'm sure especially for you in the stage of life you're in right now, is finding that good balance between work and being a great coach and an available coach, but also
Hmm.
being great at the personal side of life where you're investing in family, wife, church, and just personal things that you enjoy. And so, how have you been able to navigate that challenge of, hey, I want to be in the office as much as I can, available for my guys, but I also got stuff at home as well that I'm trying to balance?
Man, I honestly I got to do better. If my wife was on the call, she'd tell you too. Because it's diving in, and we're at a point where we're just trying to like build and grow.
Yeah.
But the things that I do
Hmm.
is you just try to build in time, and I've
Yeah.
learned that to like you got to schedule things, and they got to be non-negotiable. Like I
Hmm.
can't if I schedule date night dinner with my wife, like I can't back out of it.
Yeah.
Um, Nothing else can come before it's already scheduled in. It's just the same way if I had a meeting scheduled with my head coach, I'm not about to say, hey coach, something else came up. And so you treat it with the same level of respect.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so it's like building in, different points on the calendar. Like my wife gets it and she understands like how demanding is what we signed up for. It is,
Hmm.
but it's still healthy to build up time where we're able to kind of like get some separation. And I think the way that you do it in a way that's beneficial is you just have to be present.
Yeah.
And so when I'm here, I'm fully present. And when I go home, I have to be fully present. And
Hmm.
so it's just when you are where you are, it's being fully present. Because if I'm at home but I'm still think about work the entire time, then there is no balance.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know if
Yeah.
that. I don't even know if like balance the is the word that I would use, but it's just like just trying to be present
Yeah.
in every moment, and understanding like what really matters. Like I was
Hmm.
watching something yesterday, and the guy was just talking about like an ordeal that his wife had, and thinking that she might pass away, and she didn't. But the moments while he was waiting, he realized like the pursuit of the money and the
Hmm.
positions and the status and popularity, like in those moments while he was waiting to see what his wife's fate was going to be, none of that stuff mattered. So
Yes.
if it didn't matter then, like now that she made it, why would it matter now?
Yeah.
And so just I think realizing what truly matters and
Hmm.
knowing that, there are seasons where you're going to be more busy than others, but there's times when you don't have to be as busy and you have to take
Hmm.
advantage of those.
Yeah. So well said, Chris. And I had a mentor once in my life. He said, if you're gonna coach, right, and you're gonna have a family, you're gonna have a wife, it's got to be a lifestyle for everyone. Everyone has to be on board. And I
Right.
think really what I learned from that is when you're in this industry, to your point, right, balance isn't really the right word. It's not an 8 hour 9 to 5, or you go home and you have
Oh,
that period of time. And even on top of that, there's the travel aspect of it. And so you got to have, to your point, the presence of when I'm home, I'm home. When I'm on date night, I'm on date night, whatever it is. But when you're coaching, the same thing, right? You're leading, you're doing your work, and I think the lifestyle aspect of it just really clicked with me. Of your spouse, your family's got to be on board, right? Because it's a different industry. It's a different responsibility and just time that you're going to be in the office. But Chris,
yeah,
I appreciate you sharing the struggle that you have as well, because nobody has this down pat. So I appreciate
yeah.
you sharing that.
And Coach Lane would one thing that he would talk about as a mentor is just like Chris, like just it's about organization and it's
Yeah.
really about cutting out the fat in your
Yes.
life because you want to make things as lean as possible. And
Mm.
so um when you do that, you're able to have, more balance, I would
Mm.
say, just by just the level of organization that you have
Yeah.
is going to determine like if you're wasting time or if you have, time to actually spend because
Mm.
you've kind of prioritized it and organized it the right way. So it's cutting out the fat might be, social media is easy to
Yeah.
still, you
Absolutely.
know what I mean, an hour or two or three or five, like depending on the person,
Mm.
where you won't have to be trying to cram in all this work where you could actually be having some family time. And
Mm.
so, yeah,
It's
it's
very
cutting out the
true.
fat.
It's very true. And time is your greatest capital, right? And so how are you organizing that and utilizing that? I appreciate that
Absolutely.
point, Chris. And lastly, Chris, I just would love to hear from you. What advice would you give a young coach or a young professional in sports who's listening to this podcast as they're just getting started in their careers within sports?
Hmm. It's two things. And I think they're connected.
Mm.
One, you have to have a why. Like you have to have a why. Um, and then you have to know that why and you have to live it out. Because like you said earlier, it's like if if it's if it's not about like loving the work or and loving the people, like if that's not your why, you're going to be burnt out. There's not going to be enough money. Like I've seen so many people
Mm.
like walk away from the game because like they weren't making enough money, which I get. I understand. Like we all
Mm-hmm.
have situations and finances. I don't knock anybody for their
Mm.
financial decisions, but like for me, the reason why I've been able to stay in it, like and have the endurance to keep going is because I didn't get into it for money.
Mm.
And so not getting a certain amount of money won't make me not do it. I got into it because I love impacting the lives of other people.
Yeah.
And so it's having a why. And that why will help you to endure whatever
Mm.
comes along the way. And the reason why I think it's connected, because the other thing is like I would tell young coaches, just serve.
Mm.
Like just be a servant.
Yes.
Servant leadership is everything. It literally is everything because as a servant, you're a leader. Like like you're helping people. You're meeting them where they are. It's not about like just I think people get greatness confused all the time. And I love when Jesus explained it and he said like
Yeah.
he was telling the sons of thunder, was it James and John, and he told them, like, they were like, well, who's going to be the greatest in your kingdom? And he was just like, we don't, like, that's the way, like, the world does it. Like
Yeah.
they try to lord over each other and have these high positions. He said it won't be like that among you. He was like, among you, like, the greatest among you will be your servant.
Mm.
Just seeing the
Yes.
greatness, seeing the greatness in servanthood. And honestly, that's, I mean, God will elevate you, and you will prosper just by serving other people. And so that's I think the best advice I could give to anyone that may be listening, or that's in this profession, and want to continue to be a part of it. Like, just serve. Nobody is going to not want to promote you or to fire you or let you go because you're too good of a servant.
Yes.
Right? The problem comes when we feel like we're too big to serve.
Yes.
And then that's when things happen and they don't go in our favor. So I would just say, just serve.
Yeah.
Just serve your players, serve your program, serve the other coaches, serve other people that's just a part of the department, serve the custodians, serve, like, everybody. Like, just be a servant, and you'll be shocked how much joy that you get from serving others.
Yeah.
So much joy.
So much joy in that, Chris.
Serve.
100%. And I think with both of those, Chris, you really think about the life of Jesus. And that's really what was going through my mind when you were sharing that, is he had a why, right? And his why was, one, serve the Father in obedience, and two, is to do the work that he was sent to do, which was to go to the cross and pay the price for our sin. And then serving, right? I mean, Jesus even said himself, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. And so if the Son of God can serve his creation, then I think we have an obligation as his followers to do the same. And I think, Chris, I'm just encouraged. I'm encouraged and inspired by what you're doing in this industry. I think for our listeners, they all desire to be what you are, right? Of someone who's in this industry, who's having an impact for something bigger than just the game and wins and losses. It's really for Christ. And so I've appreciated your time today, and I appreciated your wisdom, and I pray that it impacts the listeners.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it.
If you want to get involved with Uncommon Sports Group and the mission that we are on to help you navigate the sport industry as followers of Christ, apply for our academy on our website at uncommonsg.org. That's uncommonsg.org. Be sure to catch new episodes of the Uncommon Podcast every other week on Thursdays at midnight Eastern Time. Until next time, we pray that you will strive to be uncommon by glorifying the name of God in whatever you may do. See you next time.